Here is a motion picture film. Let's tidy up this tangle of film by putting it on a reel.
Hello, everybody. This is Film Shop. I'm Jonathan, and here's my co-host, David.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. Today, we are going to be talking about strange animations. So we're talking about alternative films to the kind of Disney and sort of Pixar-y kind of stuff that's which are terrific and great things, but we're looking at sort of alternative animated feature-length films that are maybe a little bit outside of the mainstream family fare that you associate with animated films. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Yeah. What do you think about Disney films and stuff, Jonathan? Are you a fan?
I like them, yeah. I like it. I mean, I remember one of my sort of the first film I ever saw at the cinema. I remember being taken by my mum to some cinema in London to see Bambi, and I also remember going to see another sort of animation when I was quite young with both my parents. The one with Ermintrude, which is like a insect outboard motor. And I can't remember what it is, but anyway, okay. Yeah, I have nothing against them, but yeah. I guess they're the mainstream, and it's nice to get an alternative approach to animation as well.
Well, it's interesting that when I was younger growing up, it was quite a big deal when Disney came out with a new animated film, because this is back before they had computer animation and stuff like that. They used to spend years on these things. They were all hand drawn and hand painted, and then they'd spend ages shooting these cells one by one, frame by frame, and it would take them many years and a great army of people to make them. So it's quite a big deal that these films, they only came out once every few years, and when there was a new one, there was quite a lot of hullabaloo about it when they'd come out. But nowadays they seem to have like new ones every sort of 5-10 minutes, don't they? There just seems to be a flurry of them constantly now. Yeah, but they are, some of them are quite good. I enjoy them. Some of the more recent ones, like I quite liked Moana, was it called?
And, yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I thought that one was a lovely film, and they're quite enjoyable. Yeah. But there is this whole stream of alternative kind of animation. Of course, the big one is Japanese anime, which is hugely popular now.
Yep.
And just a little bit of housekeeping. I just wanted to say to our listeners, I tweeted out that Jonathan and I, on the next show, we were going to be talking about anime, but not to disappoint anyone, but due to certain logistical issues, we've had to put that one, defer it for a little bit. Mainly, the main reason for our North American listeners who seem to have a much easier and more abundant access to all sorts of stuff. Here in the United Kingdom, it can sometimes, for more obscure fare, it's a bit tricky to sometimes get a hold of it. So we had some issues. The films that we had proposed, Jonathan did not have access to them. So we've decided to defer that in the interest of keeping our schedules, because Jonathan's going away on holiday for Easter. So we are going to still do an anime related episode at some point in the next little while. So by all means, make sure that you follow the show on whatever your favorite podcast outlet is, so that when that one happens, you won't miss out on that. And or you can subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you'll hear about it when it happens.
Yes.
So anyway, tonight what we're going to do, rather than anime, we're doing animation. Animation, yes,
We've
and
got extra syllable.
I've referred to it as strange animations because the two films that we picked tonight, I think it's fair to say, from a more mainstream kind of Disney perspective, these films would be considered a little bit out there, a little bit strange, a little bit weird,
They are.
and a little bit odd in some ways,
Yeah,
but we thought they were worth bringing them to your attention and letting you know that they're out there and talking a little bit about them so that you might go and check them out because they are definitely worth checking out. So,
definitely.
Jonathan, what? Let's start with you. What film did you put forward for this film swap this
So
time?
my choice is a film called The Adventures of Mark Twain, directed by Will Vinton,
Hmm,
who I must confess is not very well known over here. I think he's better known in the United States because he made an advert for California Raisins
the Raisins, yeah.
in the mid 80s, which then became an animated series as well. But it was a sort of bit of a cult advert, could we say?
When I was growing up as a youngster, that advert played all the time on TV and was
I did
very
it.
popular. It's basically these little claymation raisins
That's
dancing
it.
to Marvin Gaye. Is it Marvin Gaye's? I heard it through the grapevine.
Okay, right.
Uh,
That's
and
interesting.
and it was they used to show it all the time, and it was a kind of a fixture of my youth. So
Right.
so this particular man then went on to make some feature films, and he actually allegedly coined the phrase claymation. He was
Yes.
the person who invented that phrase
Yeah.
to refer to the techniques that they use. Can you tell people a little bit about claymation? What that?
Well, claymation is, I suppose, in on this side of the pond, is best known for Aardman, or
Yeah,
the best known exponents of the form are Aardman, and so they make a figure out of clay, modeling clay, and then each, rather than having a sort of cell where they make a tiny movement of the picture, this one they make a tiny movement of um, the model or a number of models often. And the whole process is mind bogglingly sort of precise and hard work. Well, I guess like old fashioned cell animation as well. And yeah, Will Vinton, he actually won an Oscar in 1975 for his film Closed Mondays, which is you can see on the YouTube for free. And it's only 7 minutes. He won the best animated short Oscar, which he actually directed it with somebody else. And I watched it, and yeah, it's fun. But this one is more ambitious. It's 86 minutes altogether, and it's about the life of Mark Twain. So, David, what's your film?
well, Jonathan, I picked a really, really interesting film from the early 70s. It's actually a French film, although it was made as a co-production with Czechoslovakia. And I think
Okay,
the predominantly the film was made, and most of the kind of labor was done in Czechoslovakia. But this
yeah,
is a very famous cult film for sort of cineasts. What's that? How do you say that word?
cineasts,
I,
yeah, I
I
think.
am one, yet I don't know how to pronounce that word. But anyway, this is quite a highly regarded film. I think it's a bit of a cult film. It's one of those films that back in the '70s, the kind of the college kids would, smoke a couple of spliffs and then go down to a midnight screening of this and go,
Right.
go far out, man, whoa, because it's filled with kind of all kinds of cool psychedelic images and things.
Yeah,
Uh,
sounds great.
it is amazing,
Look
and
forward
it's
to it.
called La Planète Sauvage. That's
Ah,
the correct French title, but for the Anglified title of the film is
yeah.
Fantastic Planet. And
Okay.
this is a fantastic movie, just visually stunning, and it's like a proper kind of intelligent science fiction parable, if you will. And
Yeah.
it's really amazing. And I'm quite keen to talk a little bit about it and
Brilliant.
convince people to go and search it out and find it. So that's my film.
Sounds terrific. Shall we go away down into the screening room and watch the films?
We should indeed. I'm going to take my beverage with me. We're going to go down and settle down into our hard wooden chairs with no backs on them, and we're going to project these films onto the wall, and we'll be back in a couple of hours to come and give the listeners our thoughts about it. So, listeners, don't go away. We are literally going to be right back.
Absolutely. See you soon. And we're back.
We're back. We're back.
Wow,
Yes.
what fascinating, enthralling films.
They are indeed, actually. I loved it, actually. I really had a good time with both of them.
Good. Yeah, they are definitely unusual sort of animations, not Disney. Let's put it like that.
Definitely. I think someone who went into this kind of expecting kind of, Beauty and the Beast or Tarzan or something with Phil Collins music playing in the background and things like that, I think there might be a little bit of a sudden having to adjust your expectations here,
Yes.
because both films, I think it's fair to say, are aimed at a bit more of an older audience, I think, rather than being aimed at sort of small children. Especially Fantastic Planet, but to a degree, I think Mark Twain was sort of pitched at more of sort of young adults or teenagers and stuff rather
Yeah.
than young children.
Exactly.
Why don't we start with talking about Mark Twain?
Absolutely. Yeah. Although it was made, what was it, 12 years after Le Planète Sauvage. And so essentially, Mark Twain, American author, one of the great American authors of the sort of 19th century. I suppose he died in, I think, 1910, so sort of early 20th century, but really best known for the adventures of Tom Sawyer and the adventures of Huckleberry Finn. And so this is a sort of, the title is a sort of quite a clever title because it's The Adventures of Mark Twain, which is a book he never wrote. But he's one of the heroes of the story. So it's claymation, and so it's made by making little clay figures, and each sort of split second is a tiny little movement of each figure. So it takes a lot of time to make these films. And I suppose one of the things I guess the craftsmanship is really obvious with claymation. That I suppose cell animation, it was a craft in itself as well, but it was much more unobtrusive, I think. Whereas with claymation is like, how on earth do they do this thing? It's incredible. And so I guess the famous in Britain, the most famous claymation people are Aardman Animation, who were founded in 1971, and their first best known character in the sort of 70s was a morph, which was on Tony Hart's sort of art show on the BBC, and then they went on to create, the whole Aardman thing, massive.
What was it? Wallace and Gromit was the first
Wallace
thing
and Gromit,
I remember.
And Creature Comforts before that. They did adverts,
yes.
actually.
Yeah, that was the one where they recorded people, just average people on the street, sort of talking.
Yes.
And then they would do claymation animals talking with the voice, and it was quite amusing. It was quite funny the way that
it was brilliant. Yeah, I think it was from British Gas or something like that in the 80s. And so that is actually something that sort of links Aardman and the director of the Adventures of Mark Twain, because Will Vinton, who directed my film, made a very famous advert in the 1980s for California Raisins.
Yes, I heard it through the grapevine by
Right.
Marvin Gaye. It is Marvin
Wow.
Gaye, isn't it? That did I heard it through the
He did.
grapevine?
It is. Yeah, it is.
I'm afraid to tell my listeners that I am getting to the age now where I am starting to second guess my, pop trivia and film trivia and things like that. There used to be a time I would say things with great authority and, absolute certainty. But nowadays I'm constantly find myself going, it was Marvin Gaye, wasn't it? That one was Marvin Gaye, right? So that just goes to show you the ravages of time.
Oh dear, the ravages of time. Don't talk about it. So yeah, this film was released in 1985, and actually 10 years earlier, Will Vinton had won an Academy Award for his work. He made a film called Closed Mondays, and it won the Oscar in 1975 for Best Animated Short, which is actually, funny enough, again what Aardman have won Best Animated Short Oscars as well. And that animation is it's only 7 minutes long. You can see it on YouTube. It's really fun. I definitely recommend it. And but this one is a lot more involved, and so it starts off with Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn, who are his two most important characters, and their friend Becky Thatcher, who also appears in those books, and they sort of wandering around the countryside, and they bump into Mark Twain, who's got this sort of airship, galleon, sort of spaceship. I don't know what it is, but it's an extraordinary looking machine.
It's kind of like a cross between like an air balloon and a sort of spaceship or something, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like some it's like sort of like one of those old like Hindenburg kind of things, but it's got like these kind of wings and big glowing sort of things up at the top, doesn't it?
It's quite steampunk.
Yeah.
Quite steampunk, and it also looked quite similar to some of the some contraptions in Studio Ghibli films, flying sort of airship type things.
Yeah. That's a good comparison actually. Visually, there's a lot of similarities to some of those early Studio Ghibli pieces actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I have this children's book that I was given by my American sister-in-law called Journey by Aaron Becker. And it doesn't have any words in it. It's a beautiful book.
You can hold it up so that the people who watch the video version of the podcast will be able to see all this cool stuff.
Yeah, and it won the Caldecott honor in the States for the best, which is the sort of most prestigious sort of children's literature prize. And that's got the sort of similar sort of floating airship type things as well. Anyway, this is getting slightly sidetracked, but off they go on this journey, and the pretext for the journey is something that Mark Twain himself said, apparently made this prediction, because he was born the year that Halley's Comet sort of visited our Earth, or
was it the year or the day? Like I think it might have been.
Maybe it's the day. Yeah, perhaps it's the day. That's it. There's a certain point where it's at its closest to Earth before it sort of wings off into space again. So he was born that day, and he said, I'm going to die the next time it comes around, which is, I think, 75 years later.
Yeah.
And so the thing is, they're all the boys and the girl, the kids are going to help him get to Halley's Comet, where he's got his sort of appointment with destiny. Basically, he's sort of going on into the afterlife, I suppose.
And the extraordinary thing is that he actually did, well, or at least the legend is that he actually did die like sort of the next day or within a very short period of time after Halley's Comet came back.
Yes.
He passed away literally, so his prediction
came true.
Was accurate, which is what the sort of the premise of the film is that he's off to actually meet the comet.
Yeah. Absolutely. And the film has, I suppose, Mark Twain tells stories, and the boys and the kids. They've got a sort of, rather than a lift, there's this sort of box thing which they walk into, and it takes them into different rooms in the sort of airship, but
It's
also
some sort
into
of weird teleportation kind of device, isn't it? They walk
that's it.
into it and then they just emerge in another totally random, well, not always random, but very different sections of the ship.
Sometimes different sections of ship, sometimes random different places, sort of.
Yeah.
And I think that I believe that they used 4 or 5 different stories from Mark Twain from Irv, his work,
Yeah.
so there's bits of Eve's diary and extracts from Adam's diary, the Chronicles of Young Satan, Captain Stormfield's visit to heaven, and his first story that made his name was the celebrated jumping frog of Calaveras County. And that was a sort of short story that sort of, when he was young, that really announced his talent. And so that's animated in there as well. But it also, apparently the screenwriter is Susan Shedburn, and she was married to Will Vinton at the time, at
Okay.
least. And she gained a couple of Oscar nominations in 1978 and 1983 as well. So there's sort of some considerable talent on it. And she did a lot
So,
of research, as well as reading his work. She also read his autobiography. So quite a lot of so I would say the script for this is, it's largely the words written by Mark Twain. So in some ways, you can't get a better script, because Mark Twain, really one of the best authors there's ever been. So that's definitely a strong point of the film. But it actually looks amazing as well. It's not just the script. It's not all literary. It's got amazing visual effects, and the claymation is really mind-boggling. What do you think of that, David?
well, I agree. Visually, the film is incredibly interesting. It has all kinds of things always going on in the background and incredibly detailed designs and things, and it's all very interesting and quirky. And I
Yeah,
love the faces are very expressive, which is something you don't always get in this type of animation. But sometimes the faces are very realistic and have really amazing expressions on them,
yeah,
when the kids are talking and stuff like that.
yeah.
So the amount of detail that went into it is quite amazing.
That's true. Well, apparently there are I found something about it that said there were 130,000 figure changes, and it took them 3.5 years to make. And Will Vinton was based in Oregon, and he had an old the building was an old barber shop, and they used rooms in the house, but also they built a bit of a sort of studio space at the back, and there was sort of 17 key people, but then they had lots of other sort of freelancers coming and going, and so that they had a sort of what was it? It was an epic undertaking, I think.
It does seem like it. Wait, I don't think we mentioned that Will Vinton is the person who coined the phrase claymation, wasn't he?
He was indeed, yes. So
Yeah.
when the title cards at the beginning, it says Claymation TM. I thought, and I didn't realize. Oh yeah, that's actually TM'd by him.
Yes. Well, yeah, not surprisingly, and he that's now quite a sort of familiar term to people with about this type of
Yeah,
animation style, which
yeah,
I love. The thing that I like about it is when you're watching some of the, kind of like the Wallace and Gromit things and what was it called? Chicken Run. I love
yeah,
that one. I thought that was a terrific film.
yeah,
And this one, there are those little moments when the characters are moving, but you just see for a split second the little thumbprint of whoever
yeah.
was manipulating them. Just for a split second you can see like a fingerprint or something in
Yes,
the clay, and then it disappears. And although that might technically sound like it's a fault, but
part
I
of the
don't see
charm.
it that way, because it kind of always, to me, gives you that feeling of like that this is a handmade,
Absolutely.
handcrafted piece of work that you're seeing. That there's, nowadays everything's done with computers, isn't it? And
Yeah.
it's all done. I think they can do work quite quicker by using algorithms, and by
Yeah. Yeah.
planning out the movements and letting the computer do all the work and stuff.
Yeah.
But these days, but in the time that this film was made, and when we talk about the other film in a little bit, this is all handmade, frame by frame,
Mm.
literally having to sit there for hours in a studio, moving things just a little tiny fraction of an inch,
Yeah.
taking a couple frames, and then moving it another little tiny fraction of an inch, and then taking a couple more frames of film.
Well, there's a
So
really funny skit on, the British comedy, 90s comedy show, The Fast Show.
yes,
And there's this sort of spoof documentary and they're interviewing Nick Park, who is the main man from Aardman. And he's got this figure and he says, can you move it just a tiny bit? Can you move it just a tiny bit?
yeah,
Can you move it just a tiny bit? And it just goes on like that because it's just the sort of
well,
the crazy level of sort of detail
yeah,
that they used. And actually, and I saw another interview with him, and he said that I think the more recently they've been using foam characters to speed the process up a bit. But
yeah.
because, as you say, using the thumb, they miss the sort of thumbprints and things like that. So
Hmm.
they've actually incorporated these flaws in, so there's thumbprints in the sort of faces and things like that. Apparently, is to give it that that patina that you
Yeah,
get with
definitely.
the true claymation.
Yeah, and
And
claymation's quite similar to things like the like Ray Harryhausen and people like that, and who like King Kong and things like that were all animated in the same way. These old films that where they'd make a model, and they wouldn't be working with clay, but they'd be working with little sort of wired frames
yeah,
with all the stuff built up over top with
yeah,
rubber or whatever, and they would literally just animate them like that, and all the amount, the attention to detail of kind of making sure things line up properly with the live action. So it's very similar, the discipline involved, and
yeah,
the amount of craftsmanship and thing that goes in to making these things is, I think, to me, part of the appeal of them, is that because you always look at it and you think, wow, that's amazing, that the time and the effort, and because it isn't just that, but it's also the artistry of the models that they're using, the clay models and the
yeah,
designs of the ships and everything. So it's incredible artistic endeavor that they've done as well
yeah,
with all that side of it. So
definitely. Yeah, it's got this real steampunky feel, the
yeah,
thing, and I guess the stories that they use, apart from the celebrated jumping frog of Calaveras County, most of them are probably his lesser known ones, lesser
mm,
known stories, like the extracts from Adam's diary and
yeah,
Chronicles of Young Satan. Well, I guess maybe in America and North America, people might know those stories better, but over this side, I guess we're more familiar with just Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn.
yeah, and maybe the what is it, the Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's Court and
Yeah,
a
that one
couple
as
of
well. Yeah,
other
that.
things as that are kind of his really famous ones. And those are like, I'm the same. I mean, I'm Canadian, but those are the books that I read when I was younger.
Yeah,
Um, and I think, I guess if I was gonna, because I think this is a wonderful film and it's really enjoyable to watch.
yeah,
But I guess the two things I would say in terms of a criticism, that
yeah,
would be one of them, is that because the film is very much um, completely taken from Mark Twain's writings and little autobiographical bits about his life and things like that.
yeah.
I think a younger viewer going into this, or even someone who maybe just isn't as familiar with Mark Twain and his work
Yes.
and uh, and his life story, a lot of the references and things like that would kind of go over their head,
Well,
so
that's
to
it.
speak. because it's kind of like you'd have to be like a Mark Twain fanboy, if as it were, to really
Yeah.
sort of appreciate the film on that kind of many layered level, because you'd have to know what all those references and things are to
Yes.
kind of pick up on that.
Well, I think this leads me to an interesting point, that why is the film not better known? And I think part of the things apparently is that when it was released, it was given a G rating, and so although Stanley Kaufman in the New Republic magazine said it was simultaneous. He appreciates the simultaneous appreciation of its smoothness and the invisible immense labor that made the smoothness possible, as you were just saying.
Mm.
But the thing was, because they put it as a G, that meant that it was put in what they call the kiddie ghetto, which is sort of children's films. But the thing is, it's not really a children's film.
Well, and even today, because when you suggested this film, I had to then go and search it out to see how I could watch it, because I don't have a copy of it in my collection,
Yeah,
and I found it on Amazon Prime, but it is very much presented as a children's film.
yeah,
You know,
it is.
it looks like it's a children's animated film, so but a young child
Yeah,
might, if they went into this, because it's so quirky and has all these weird sort of details, and a lot of
yeah,
the humor is a bit more adult. Like this whole middle section is about Adam and Eve, basically,
yes,
and kind of a parody of Adam and Eve, and male and female relationships and things.
yeah,
And for a small child, that would just, all of it would just go right over their
completely,
head.
yeah.
And they
But
would probably switch it off halfway through, because they would just be baffled by it all and not
definitely,
get it. But I think an older, like sort of from a teenagers onwards,
yeah,
this is quite a rewarding film, and quite amusing, and quite quirky and fun,
yeah,
and imaginative. And I guess that's the one thing I think the film probably hasn't been presented and marketed properly, so
no,
it kind of misses its potential audience.
that's it. I think it very much did back in 1985, and that's why it's not better known. But I would say yes, and the stories that they chose are not necessarily the best known of his stories.
Mm.
But that did make me think, okay, I've got to go and read a bit more
Mm.
of Mark Twain than I realised, because I mean I've got a copy of Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer, and I thought, well, that's enough, or
Yeah.
maybe Connecticut Yankee. But it turns out there's a whole lot of his stuff, masses of his stuff, that's actually really interesting as well.
Yeah.
And it's time
And
for
he was
homework.
very prolific, from what I understand. Like he wrote articles for newspapers. He
Yeah,
wrote short stories, long things. He wrote things for newspapers. He wrote fiction novels, nonfiction books. He
yeah.
was just constantly. He must have had a very sore wrist,
Right.
proper carpal tunnel syndrome, because he was just he wrote
Yeah,
just
constantly.
reams and reams. As a matter of fact, they say, because he even would write under different names, like
Uh,
different pen names and
oh
things.
yeah.
So even they say today, every once in a while, they still find something
Oh
and
really?
realize that it was written by Mark Twain,
My
but
gosh.
because he wrote it under an assumed name, and he sent it to a journal or a magazine or something,
Right.
they didn't realize until recently they discovered that, oh, actually this is a Mark Twain that we didn't know about.
Right.
So that's quite extraordinary that he kept himself busy. Plus, he was
Yeah.
kind of like a personality, wasn't he? He was like, this is in the days before radio and TV,
Yeah.
but he was kind of like
Media
he was known for
personality.
wearing this white suit, and he was like a
Yeah.
celebrity personality, like a what you'd call an influencer
He wasn't. He
nowadays,
was.
wasn't
Interestingly, you can actually see Mark Twain as a film, one of the earliest bits of film, I suppose, made by Thomas Edison in 1908. Thomas Edison went up to visit Mark Twain in his house just a couple of years before he died, and took this film of him sort of standing there in front of his house. And that's
he?
obviously on YouTube as well. Look that one up.
Oh, Jonathan,
Um,
I can feel a factoid coming on there.
I feel it. I feel it. But yeah, there's some great sort of dialogue because it's Mark Twain. One I really like is cauliflower is just a cabbage with a college education, which
Yes.
is really good.
Yeah. One
But
of my
he's
favorites was that bit
oh yeah,
at the end when Eve brings the apples,
oh
and he
yeah,
says, "Oh, it's completely against my principles, but you do find your principles are a little bit, Sorry, I'm paraphrasing rather than actually giving you the
yeah,
quote, but he says your principles tend to waver a bit when you have an empty stomach,
right, yeah.
So
Well, he was a very philosophical writer, it turns out. Which
yeah,
I also that was new to me. And another great one. He said, "A man's got to be in his own head to be happy," which I thought was a great
yes.
sort of deep one.
That may well
Um,
be the only place that you're ever going to find true
well,
happiness.
that's it. That's it. Anyway, there's loads of. It's one of those films that you probably watch again and get even more out of.
Yeah.
And it's a really rewarding film, and I'd definitely recommend it. Uh, yeah.
Well, I
So
concur. I mean, I'm really glad you suggested this one because I was saying to Jonathan just before we started recording that I mentioned that as I was watching this film last night, as it happens, I kind of vaguely felt like I had seen this before,
right,
probably
okay,
at the time when it came out.
yeah,
But then it was just kind of forgotten about because it hasn't really been in the kind of popular conversation
certainly has not
since then. It kind of was one of those films that just kind of
forgotten
sank
about
and
completely.
disappeared and was kind of forgotten about.
Yeah,
So when I saw it, I kind of went, "Oh, actually, I vaguely remember this." But I really, really enjoyed it, and I definitely think it's worth um, searching out and finding. How
brilliant.
did you see it, Jonathan?
I saw it on Amazon Prime, where you can watch it for free with adverts, very quick little adverts,
Hmm.
and they didn't really interrupt too much. And yeah, it's only 82 minutes long,
Yeah,
nice and
that's
short.
the same. That's how I watched it as well. It was on Amazon Prime. It's there for free. And actually, in my case, like I said, I watched it just last evening. Well, we're recording on the 1st of April, and I'm not joking when I say that the film only got interrupted once, and it was like a little 20-second very quick thing, and then it went
Yeah,
back. But it
exactly.
did do it in the single most inappropriate spot
How
that
funny.
you could possibly imagine because it basically was towards the end and it was a bit of a kind of touching emotional moment, and
Yeah,
then suddenly it just went freebie, and then they had this little advert for whatever it was, I can't remember, and then it came cut back into the film. So
yeah,
that is the first time I've had that kind of experience with it.
right.
And
Yeah,
so hopefully viewers, if you listeners, sorry, or viewers, if you go to check it out, just be warned that may happen, but hopefully
yeah.
it doesn't
It's
put
due a
you off.
disc release, I think. And if
Yeah.
I could, one last thing before we finish
Okay.
is that Charles Solomon, who used to teach, or who may still teach at the UCLA Film School, the famous UCLA Film School, and author of Enchanted Drawings, A History of Animation, said it was one of the best animations of the 1980s.
Uh,
And so that's quite a weighty authority, I would say.
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's really good. It is a really good, interesting film.
Yeah. Should we
But
move
I
on
guess
to your film, David?
I think so. Yeah, let's just take a little very brief few seconds break, and then we're going to come back with Fantastic Planet.
Absolutely. Look forward to it.
And we're back, listeners, and we're ready to talk about our second film today, another strange animation, and it is called The Fantastic Planet. Uh, This film was made by a French director whose name was Rene Laloux. Now, he is a very, very interesting person because he got his start making films in a mental institution,
Did
basically.
he?
Which, yeah, I mean, I don't, I want to be careful not to, that's how they referred to them back then.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
of course,
No.
it was a place where they were treating people with mental illness.
Yeah.
And he was kind of a graphic artist and had worked in a variety of roles before he ended up
Yeah.
working at this place. And what he was doing was basically kind of like art therapy. He started courses
Oh, really?
for people, and it was just voluntary for people who were uh, patients at this institution, and they
Right.
would come and draw pictures and do paintings and things like that, and it was just sort of part of their kind of therapy and their treatment.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, they decided to make a short film because Rene Laloux was interested in filmmaking, and he said, "Why don't we take some of these things that we've been doing and film them and put a little story film
Wow.
together?" So they made a little short feature, which is really interesting with all these sort of cutout lanterns and things. And it was just
Okay.
a little short film. But that then led to a collaboration with a man named Roland Topor, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, but he was
Yeah.
a French cartoonist and sometimes actor and just general personality in France who was, I guess at the time was sort of just on the cusp of fame or becoming more well known. And
Yeah.
Rene Laloux reached out to him to ask him to help do some designs and things to make some further short films.
Yeah.
And that ended up leading to a collaboration for a series of little short films that were really well received. The
Yeah.
most famous one being called Les Escargots, or it's about snails, basically giant snails
Oh, right.
that come and invade a farm,
Okay.
and this was really well received, and that led Rene Laloux to the opportunity to make a feature length film. He was actually
Okay.
his a producer in France came to him and said, "Why don't you make a feature film?"
Right.
So what they did is they decided on a popular French novel called Hommes en Ciré. Ciré. I apologize for my French pronunciations,
Yep.
but and they basically created this film. They for commercial reasons, I guess for budgetary reasons, they found a small studio in Czechoslovakia that they went to produce the film in terms of doing the cell animation and the painting and the artwork.
Yep.
And the film took several years to produce. I mean, just like you were talking about with Mark Twain, this film, I think they started production in 1967, but the film wasn't released until I think 1972 or 73.
Wow.
So it actually took quite a while. It was impacted. The production, I think, was impacted when the Soviet Union invaded Czechoslovakia as well, and I think they
It
had to
wouldn't
pick
help.
up and move shop and pick up the production somewhere else.
Yeah.
So the film had quite an interesting sort of backstory just getting it made. But it has become, as I said at the beginning, a bit of quite a well-known and famous kind of cult film among
Okay.
cinema buffs as sort of an alternate animation.
Yeah.
It's very much, I think, pitched at adults. It's
Definitely.
as you know, there is some imagery of nudity and there's some violence
Yeah.
and it is a proper kind of heady science fiction, sort of
Yeah.
speculative fiction story.
Yeah, it is.
The story, I'll be very, very sort of keep it at a very high level, but it's basically It is the story of the Ohms, which are sort of descendants of humans from Earth, and they live on a planet that is dominated by these giant beings that are kind of like giants to the Ohms, and they're
Yeah.
called the Trags. And and they basically keep humans as kind of essentially domesticated animals in their homes.
Yeah.
And then what happens is one particular, and I mean, the film deals with showing how it kind of puts people in the position of kind of how we would look at our household pets.
Yeah.
Like, I have a cat here at home, and I'm sure some people have dogs, and
Do you have a dog?
yeah, you have a dog. So,
Yeah.
so it kind of puts people in the position of being kind of domesticated pets for the children of these giant blue
Yeah.
people, and they're very incredibly insensitive to the needs and feelings of their little pets, humans.
Yeah.
But what happens is there's one of them begins to become educated, and I'll explain that by that these drags, um, they use these little weird these weird devices that they wear on their head that basically transmit knowledge at a very uh, increased rate into their brain, and just sort of it basically, uh, I guess the best way to describe it was it just basically writes on their brain all the
Yeah.
knowledge very quickly, so that they don't have to make a lot of effort, and they just become very knowledgeable.
I'd love one of
And
those things.
yeah, I know it would be very handy. Yeah. At this point, especially because I can't remember about any Marvin Gaye information. So what happens is this little ohm manages to, through a defect in one of these devices, he gets to absorb some of this knowledge, and he
Yeah.
becomes much more highly educated and intelligent and knowledgeable about his environment and about the situation that they're in and about the planet and about these people who rule over them.
Yeah.
And one day, because the little girl who owns him, mistreats him, not out of necessarily kind of cruelty, but more just like sort of a complete inability to empathize with him at all. And she just treats him as a plaything. And
Yeah.
sometimes the play is quite torturous and cruel, although she maybe just doesn't realize that that's what she's doing. Um, so he escapes, he runs away, and he finds a bunch of other Ohms who all live out in the wild, out in the forest and wilderness outside of the city. And there, although he has some issues in first integrating into the community there, they eventually welcome him in. And when he left, he brought one of these little knowledge devices with him, and he starts to educate the other people in the community, the other humans, so that they also start to gain knowledge.
Yeah.
And so then the drugs come out, and every once in a while, and they just basically just kind of like we do here when they go out and they kind of cull squirrels and foxes and things because the population's getting too big.
Yeah.
That's what these big blue creatures literally go out into the forest and just wholesale massacre these people to kind of control the population.
Yeah.
And so what ends up happening, without giving the game away, is that there is in essence a bit of a revolution
Yeah.
where the human alms stand up to their oppressors and
Yeah.
and begin to assert their independence.
Yes. Yeah. It's
So
it's an extraordinary film. I'd never, well, I'd heard of it, I think, through you, really. I'd never heard of it before. And I was, yeah, very impressed. It's very sort of very spooky, surreal, I would say. One of my notes, I said it's like a spooky yellow submarine because it's got that sort of little bit yellow submarine, Beatles yellow submarine type thing,
yeah.
but it's much spookier. And
Do you think a bit of that too is about the, because we should mention that the score to the film, it's kind of this kind of weird, trippy, psychedelic
Pink
kind of
Floydian, I wrote
jazz
down at one
score.
stage.
So, sorry?
Pink Floydian, I wrote down at one
Yeah,
stage.
yeah, I think so. It is kind of a little bit kind of Autumn Heart Mother kind of, that. What's the other one of theirs? Sorry, you see what I mean about the pop trivia? It's all going out of my head now. I can't remember Pink Floyd album names anymore either. I remember Autumn Heart Mother because that's the one with the cow on it, isn't it?
That is the one.
That's
Yeah,
that was one of my favorites.
exactly.
In
Middle,
my
something like that.
yeah.
But that's sort of
But anyway, so the music is very much kind of like that, very sort
yeah,
of atmospheric-y, trippy, and this is like made in the late '60s, early '70s, so it does very much have that kind of psychedelic, head trippy kind of vibe
yeah,
to it. Um, and the look and everything of the creatures and the aliens and the terrain of the planet and things is all really kind of weird and has kind of weird colors and weird shapes and
yeah,
things are oozing. There's that terrific bit when they make he's out with the people in the forest and they make him some clothes, and the way they make the clothes are these little sort of globular creatures that just look
yes,
like they're vomiting.
yeah,
And he stands in the middle of them, and then I guess this vomitous sort of
stuff.
fluid that comes out of them kind of entwines itself into some sort of fabric
Yeah,
that he can wear, and he says so he sort of becomes draped in these clothes that like everyone else is wearing.
it's
So
very peculiar. I mean,
yeah,
think sort of things that occurred to me at the time, but it sort of seems one bit of it seemed a bit like Ronald Searle, the chap who illustrated Hunter S. Thompson books, who was a cartoonist, but he also did quite a lot of the Pink Floyd The Wall animations.
yeah.
They're sort of quite sort of strange and sort of gory
Yeah, and kind of
cartoons.
surreal and with weird kind of contorted faces and things.
Yeah.
And it kind of reminded me, I mean, the thing that when I watch this film reminds me of what, like when I was sort of in kind of the late '70s, early '80s, there was a magazine. I don't know if you got it here in Britain, but there was a magazine called Heavy Metal, which was just sort of like an adult comic book, and it was
Oh,
like
okay.
mainly science fiction
I didn't see it.
based stories. And this is the kind of film that would kind of fit into that, like that kind of
Okay.
Mobius kind of look of the
Right.
artwork and these really sort of speculative science fiction kind of
Yeah.
stories and things. So this has very much kind of like a heavy metal kind of
Okay, that's
uh,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah,
Other things I wrote down, its influences seem to be sort of, or maybe it influenced him, Terry Gilliam, some of his
yeah,
animations,
yeah, definitely,
old Edward Lear, his sort of cartoons,
yeah,
and Hieronymus Bosch, El Bosco. Some of it seems to be like the sort of Garden of Earthly Delights. Sort
yeah,
of, it's just full of strangeness, basically.
yeah. I mean, is it all right if I mention like because your initial reaction to the film I thought was quite interesting because on the night you said, okay, we kind of agreed what films we were going to do. And then I'll tell our listeners that you texted me sort of at about 11 o'clock on the night. You said, I'm going to watch that Fantastic Planet tonight. And then you texted me about 11 o'clock and you just went, I'm 6 minutes in. This is just so weird. I'm going to watch Mark Twain.
Well,
and
yeah.
I was, both bemused and bewildered by that reaction, that initial reaction. So I just wonder if you could like
Yeah, well,
explain a little bit about why like you had that sort of strong reaction to it when you first watched it.
I will. I'll do my best to explain. Well, I thought that as we're making a podcast about the film, we want to be sort of relatively easy to follow, or easy enough to follow. And I just thought this is just so strange. But I mean, it takes, I guess, more than 6 minutes to get going.
Yeah.
First of all,
And this first 6 minutes, I mean, there's an image again to try and do. I can't really avoid spoilers, but describe. There is the film opens with an image of a half naked woman carrying a baby, and
yeah,
then kind of repeatedly getting knocked down the hill by a giant blue finger.
yeah,
And when I say it, and I'm sure people who haven't seen the film to hear me say that will just kind of go, "What the?" That
yeah.
just sounds bizarre. And so I think you do definitely have to approach this movie that it is not a Disney film,
It is most
and it
certainly
is
not a Disney
not a
film.
children's film. It is an
Yeah,
animated film because I think sometimes people they do just have a knee jerk kind of response to think that if it's an animated film, if it's a cartoon,
yeah,
that it's for kids.
yeah.
And this film is definitely not a children's
Most
film.
certainly not.
It
Most
is
certainly not.
definitely, I think you should be, kind of over 14
Yeah,
at least before you
yeah,
sit yourself down to try and watch this because it is a film that's aimed at adults and it is a very intelligent, thoughtful kind of science fiction sort of you know kind of story, isn't it?
yes,
It's not
yes.
Star Wars either, is it? It's kind
It's
of
not
like there's a
Star
little
Wars.
bit of kind of intellectual
I
sort
mean,
of
it's not
you know
anything I've ever seen like this, really.
yeah. Yeah. Yes. But I mean, I
Uh,
would say, because that's kind of, for me, what we want to do in the podcast is kind of present things to
yeah,
people that they might not have considered
well, it's a
watching.
cult classic,
Or
isn't it?
it is very much, this is a highly regarded film. It actually, I'll point out, because we did a show recently, our Oscar Blunder show, where we talked about films that didn't win Oscars,
Oh yeah.
great films that didn't win Oscars. But this film actually won the special jury prize at the Cannes Film Festival in
Wow.
1973.
My
So
goodness.
this was a highly regarded, well received piece of film,
Yeah.
and it is partly because of the uniqueness of it, and it is very rewarding to watch because it has a very thoughtful story. It's kind of like a parable, if you will, of kind of sort of human rights and about I mean, for me, a big part of it would be interesting was the element of the education
Yeah.
because very much the key to the advancement and the progress of these ohms, these little people who are being oppressed
Yeah.
in this society is the fact that they don't have access to education.
Yes.
And in this film, the pivotal the impetus, if you will, of what changes the dynamic
Yeah.
in this situation is when these people start to learn about things and
Yeah.
start to see.
Think.
Yeah, they start to think and see the bigger picture and understand a bit more about what's going on.
Yeah.
And I think when you see today, I mean, it's quite interesting that these people in the film are blue. I'll just say that. But they don't want the Ohms to possess that education. They don't
No.
want them to have it. They want to keep them dumb and ignorant. And
Yeah.
they
Little pets.
actually there's a great scene where they have this kind of council meeting and they're having this discussion about you know these guys seem to be organizing and they seem to be understanding things more than we gave them credit for. So we need to go out and kill them quickly. We need
Yeah.
to exterminate more of them, and we need to get rid of them because they're starting to sort of catch on. And I
Yes.
think that's quite a theme that runs through the film,
Yeah.
which is really quite interesting.
Yeah. And well, it's yeah, very very straight. One of the interesting things that I read is that after watching it is that OMS we think of. I think why are they called OMS? I mean the names, the trags and the OMS. It's all very strange names, but OMS, of course, OM is the French word for man. So the
Mm,
humans are sort of men or
mm.
people. Yeah, but yes, one thing I wrote down, there was a biscuit of light ritual. So there's lot. So despite the sort of story does pick up, and there's this sort of rebellion, I suppose, and attempted sort of de-omization, as they call it, the Trugs call it. But the strangeness continues throughout it. And yeah, there's what the Oms. Some of them have just bizarre hats on as well. As one of them seems to be wearing a an octopus hat, and yeah, it's yeah, extraordinary, extraordinary stuff.
Well, I quite like that little bit when they showed that strange creature, and there's a hatched egg and a little sort of baby animal of some kind, and then this other creature comes over and starts licking it, and you just assume that it's mother,
Yeah,
and it's like a newborn baby, and then all of a sudden it just opens its mouth up and swallows it and
eats
eats
it.
it. And
Yeah,
you realize that no, it's a predator, and so there's lots of little sort of touches like that all the way through it. That. And there's a terrific scene that they have when the young man is trying to ingratiate himself into this community of Ohms out in the forest, out in the wilderness. They have this he has to have a duel, a fight with another member of the tribe.
yes,
And the way that they do it is they strap these kind of weird kind of alligator creatures to their chest, and
yes.
then
I
they
wrote that
sit there and they stand in front of each other, kind of going like this with these creatures that and fight with them.
in my
So
notes. I called them animals of combat
yes,
because
yes,
that was very strange. Yeah, that's great. Yeah,
yeah.
that,
So there's lots of it's an incredibly imaginative film, and as I say, I think it's got a good subtext there that makes it very interesting
yeah,
and rewarding to view.
yes.
Um, Jonathan, how did you watch it?
I actually had the DVD or
Oh,
DVD
okay,
Blu-ray sort of box
okay.
from who is it? Arrow.
Masters of Cinema. Is it this one? If I
Yeah,
find
Masters of
this,
Cinema. That's the one. It's
is that the
exactly the
one?
same,
Oh, okay.
identical to that.
All
Yeah.
right. Well, that's how I watched it as well. Viewers, people who are watching the video version, you can see me holding the Blu-ray up in my hand. It is actually still in print. I checked because I know this has been out for quite some time. It's copyrighted 2012.
Okay.
Yeah, 2012. So it's actually been on in the catalog for 10 years. Um, but it is still available. You can buy it on Amazon for about a tenner. Definitely worth it. It's got a
That's good.
Blu-ray and a DVD and a little book inside. And the DVD or the Blu-ray or the DVD um, includes not only the film, but it also includes a selection of Laloux's short films, like the
Yes.
ones I talked about, some of those early short films. And they're really interesting to watch. And they are just little sort of 10, 12
Mm.
minute films. It's got both the French and English version of the film
Yeah.
because when the film was shown in the United States, they obviously dubbed it into
They dubbed it.
English, and
Yeah.
they might have made some minor alterations. I'm not sure
Yeah.
if they
Well, I
did or not.
confess I watched
It's also
the.
got the complete soundtrack on it, so you can listen just to the music.
Oh well.
And it's also got a documentary about Laloux, so you can
Oh
find
really?
out a little bit more about his background. And I would point out, I don't think these are in print anymore, but I've got them. They are also from the Masters of Cinema. But
Yeah.
Rene Laloux, he was not a very prolific filmmaker. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us. He passed away, I think, in the early 2000s
Okay.
from heart failure. But he did make a couple more feature films. One of them is called The Masters of Time, and the other one is called Gandahar, or as it was known in the United States, it was called Light Years. And again, these are very much, especially I mean, I really like Masters of Time a lot,
Yeah.
which is kind of a clever kind of time travel sort of kind of a Back to the Future, but like for, the thinking man's Back to the Future
Yeah.
is what this is. And it's like a really, really cool film. And unfortunately, these films, these two are out of print,
Right.
and they've not been reissued on Blu-ray. I'm not quite sure why that is. I guess just because of their relative obscurity. But I know
Yeah.
that Rene Laloux has his fans, so I don't know why no one has picked those up. So if
Hmm.
any of the boutique Blu-ray publishing labels out there are listening, get on that, get those out,
Yeah,
so that
definitely.
people
Get
can
on it,
watch them because
people.
they're really cool films. Um, so anyway, on that note, and I would mention too that Fantastic Planet is available on the BFI player as well.
Oh, is it?
So
That's good.
every episode I end up plugging the BFI player.
Yeah.
I'm not getting paid to plug them. I'm just doing it because I think you
Ah,
should go out and subscribe.
yeah.
But of course, the people at the BFI, if you want to come and lavish me and Jonathan with money to
Yeah.
talk about you, then well, the horses have already bolted, unfortunately, but by all means, send me a check if you want. But anyway, on that note, Jonathan, was there anything else you wanted to talk about tonight?
Well, no, I think that is my main points there. Nothing else.
Okay, okay,
We're
groovy. So you're gonna have a bit of an Easter holiday.
having a little bit of an Easter break,
Yeah,
exactly, because it's half term in the UK next week.
yeah,
Not half term, Easter holidays.
yeah.
And so we're going to go away for a bit and yeah, relax, hopefully.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, well, I hope you have a nice time. We're doing a few bits and bobs as well over the holidays, so it'd be
Lovely.
nice to have a bit of a break.
Yeah.
Um, Listeners, I would just tell you to, if you would be so kind as to hit the subscribe or follow button on your favorite podcast vendor on our show. That really helps us out. As
Yes.
you know, we're out there in the social media space competing with about 5 billion other people who are all desperately vying for your attention. So anything, if you can just hit that follow button, you'd be helping us out. And
Exactly.
and by all means, give us a little bit of a rating as well,
Yeah,
and give us some
review.
feedback.
We love reviews.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you. Even, obviously be kind and polite and considerate, but we'd love to hear some constructive feedback
Yeah.
about how we can make the show better for you. And so by all means, let us know what you're thinking. And if you have any comments or things you want to say about the films we talked about tonight, or any other kind of similar things that you'd like to recommend or let us know about, we'd love to hear from you. We're on Twitter. You can find us at FilmSwap UK, and you can also find us on TikTok and Instagram under the same thing, at FilmSwap UK. I will say though, we haven't been posting on Instagram mainly just because I, for the life of me, can't work it out. So if anyone wants to send me a little message and tell me how the heck do I put videos and posts on
Ah,
Instagram, I would love to hear from you. Um, we're also on Facebook. We've got a Facebook group. So just look for Film Swap, the podcast, and come and join us. And we've got a YouTube channel, and that's at Film Swap _ podcast.
yeah.
And so you come to our YouTube channel. We, aside from video versions of the podcast, you can also see our fabulous, funky, fun film factoids.
Yeah, they're great.
We've been doing a series of little 1 minute short factoids about films, usually relating to the films that we're talking about. But that may not always be the case. We may just randomly pick an interesting film fact that we want to just put out there. But we'll be doing those regularly. And there are other prizes and surprises coming up on our YouTube channel in the coming weeks. So by all means, come and check us out there, and subscribe if you want to hear about when we post a new video.
Please
So
do.
we'd love to see you wherever you consume your stuff. Come and find us because we're there, and we'd love to hear from you.
Definitely.
All right, so Fantastic Planet, The Adventures of Mark Twain. Go and check them out, listeners. And Jonathan and I will be back on the other side of the Easter holidays
Absolutely.
to talk about some more films. So we'll see you soon.
See
Thanks
you
for
soon.
listening.
Have fun. Goodbye.
Bye bye.